Hi everyone, I'm Mark Loveys, CEO of Datagate Telecom Billing. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for this fifth installment of Talking VoIP with Datagate, where we go on a learning journey of subjects related to VoIP and UCaaS from the perspective of MSPs and wholesale telecom providers. In today's episode, our guest is entrepreneur and cloud communication expert, Eric Hernaez, who is best known in the MSP UCaaS industry as the founder and former president of SkySwitch, the market-leading white label UCaaS provider. Before SkySwitch, he was the VP of marketing for NetSapiens, and today, having sold SkySwitch to BCM1, he is the founder of iReply Back Office Services, a member of Datagate's board of directors, and the CEO of the revolutionary new SD-WAN business called RabbitRun. If you have any questions for Eric today, please type them into the appropriate area at the side of our screen, and we will address these at the end of this presentation. So Eric, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Mark. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'll say the build up to this has been a little intimidating to me, but I'm going to do my best not to disappoint.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Well, we've been particularly keen to talk to you on this series because your experience and successful track record goes directly into what this webinar series is all about. From your time as Vice President of Marketing with NetSapiens, through to founding SkySwitch and building that business to the enormous scale where it now provides over 600 MSPs throughout North America with VoIP and UCaaS, to exiting SkySwitch, to now where you're starting up a brand new MSP-focused business called RabbitRun. So how did you first get involved in the telecom business, and how did you progress to become the Vice President of Marketing for NetSapiens?
Sure. Well, I started my career actually as a lawyer, and this was way back in 1995, right when the internet was just getting started. If you remember things like CompuServe and the bulletin boards, I found myself very drawn into the whole internet culture back then. Of course, as a young lawyer, it was a much different, landscape back then. The internet providers then were primarily the big telcos, and finding a way into working with one of those firms was a little difficult. So I kind of found a back door in. I'm Filipino on my father's side, and I was in the Philippines visiting my father when we happened to cross paths with a gentleman he knew who had just started the very first commercial ISP in the Philippines. So immediately I started thinking about ways I could ditch my legal career in the United States and work for this company in the Philippines. So I ended up doing that, and that got me into the internet business. Well, fast forward, the local telephone company in the Philippines, which was pretty much the government-owned monopoly at the time, wanted to buy a controlling interest in this company, which is called Sequel Communications. And so they needed a lawyer. It just happened to be an opportune time for me to join that firm. And what transpired was, in return for giving them control of that internet business, we found ourselves in the telephone business. And so from there, I became the COO of Sequel Communications, and we started a calling card business in the United States. And so that calling card business was for Filipinos living in the United States who wanted to call back home. $1 a minute. It was it was quite an expensive proposition. So very quickly, I decided that the best way to optimize that environment was to put those calls over the internet. And so went out and found a vendor who could, and again, this was very early days, this company was one of the first 3 vendors of voice over IP gateways. Back then they were big hulking machines that sat in a data center and would convert like an analog signal to voice. But anyway, ended up being able to implement this company's solution and actually had one of the very first voice over IP connections between the US and the Philippines. So that got me into telecom, and through my relationship with this company, I actually left SQL and went to work for this company, Lincoln, and that got me into the real, I'd say, heart of telecommunications, because they were dealing with telephone companies all over the world, and dealing with the different protocols and stacks and different things that you had to be familiar with in order to sell to these companies. Really got me into the nuts and bolts of telecommunications software. That company, Lincoln, got purchased by another company that was a DSL manufacturer, and so I started at that point, which was 1999, my own company, which was really a very early version of what SkySwitch was to become. The idea was, well, there are businesses who want to provide calling card services. They don't necessarily want to own the infrastructure and know the technology. We provided that service, calling cards platform as a service, to those very early customers around 2000. Fast forward, I had a couple different iterations of that business and that business model. Until about 2010, when the financial meltdown of 2008 kind of took its toll on our business. I ended up leaving that business and looking for a job. Basically, I found NetSapiens. NetSapiens was a company with really a rich history. The founders of NetSapiens came from another company called New Era, which was another one of the pioneering VoIP gateway companies. They had really great technology, and so I figured if I'm going to work for somebody else, I want to hang around with these smart people, and so I became the VP of marketing for NetSapiens.
Wow.
So that's how I got into the telecom business.
Yeah, that's an amazing journey. Starting off in law and a lot of M&A and changes and transitions, and yeah, it's fascinating. Fascinating. It's I had no idea myself, all those connections. That's incredible. And so Eric, when you were at NetSapiens, what were your experiences there, and what did that teach you about the MSP aspect of the telecom industry?
Yeah, it's actually very interesting. In my previous companies, we were working primarily with more wholesale type applications. SIP trunks, if you will. It wasn't called SIP trunks, but basically managing wholesale relationships between carriers. And I was always familiar with the business phone service aspect of it, but it was still very early days, and NetSapiens was really one of the pioneers of these platforms. In selling the NetSapiens solution, we of course came across many MSPs and other customers, potential customers, if you will. And a couple things were interesting. VoIP by this time in 2011, 12 timeframe had been around for quite a while, and many companies had tried to deploy it only to get get burned, if you will, because face it, it was much harder to do in the early 2000s. Actually through the until very recently, it was a lot harder to do. The bandwidth wasn't there. Computers were not as powerful as they are today. Memory was much more expensive, so it was just harder to make it work. So anyway, we at NetSapiens, we were selling into this market where many of the MSPs we talked to had tried something or had tried to resell some solutions, and really just got burned doing it, because what happens is if you're selling if you're an MSP selling services and you introduce voice and the voice stops working, well, you've got a pretty angry customer, and there's a good chance you're going to lose that customer. So a lot of the MSPs we were talking to, number one, were wary of getting burned again, because they had lost customers or experienced that kind of dynamic. But also as a result of that, or maybe as an extension of that, we're looking for a solution where they could sell a voice service into their customers, but not necessarily be completely responsible for it. Maybe you could say they wanted to be able to point the finger elsewhere. So what happened was a lot of MSPs started becoming agents for the more established players. So they would become agents for Vonage or RingCentral or 8x8, the larger customers. That was safer, of course, because then they weren't responsible for the voice services. Unlike a lot of other IT services, where if the system is down for a couple of minutes, no big deal. We'll try and load the page again later. In the voice world, if the phone goes down for a couple of minutes and customers can't reach you, it's a big deal. So voice services were very sensitive to any type of downtime.
Yeah, I remember those days, and in fact, you take it for granted now that the VoIP platforms are, the general VoIP services is very high, and I do remember when it was, you could tell almost that you were talking to somebody through a VoIP connection, because it may not be quite as rugged as the conventional systems, but nowadays it's amazing where we've come, and it's easy to forget what it was like earlier on.
Absolutely. So what that meant, though, is in talking to potential customers when I was at NetSapiens, many of them expressed an interest in having NetSapiens run the platform for them. What was appealing to them was the ability to own that relationship with the customer. Because if you're just an agent for another company, of course, once that customer signs up for the other company, they have the billing relationship, number one, but you kind of lose control of that customer.
Yeah, true.
But if you still have the IT portion of their business, you're still dealing with all the headaches. So if the voice doesn't work, they're still going to call you up and complain as their IT vendor. Of course, you don't have the benefit of that relationship. So we came up with the idea at NetSapiens of this white label model where we would actually host a platform for them. The customer, or the MSP customer of NetSapiens, would own the billing relationship with their end customer, and it was kind of really the best of both worlds. But it was surprising, really, and I think this is still the case today, and it's only just becoming to the point where it's changing, where there's a real hesitation among MSPs to take that step and venture out there, because they don't want to sully their reputation that they've worked hard to build over many years for the other services that they may be providing, by offering voice, even though it is very lucrative, and losing a customer potentially as a result. So anyway, fast forward. I started the idea for this white label business while I was at NetSapiens.
Right.
But kind of early on, there was concern among the NetSapiens base about potential channel conflict. So I took that as my cue to work out a deal with NetSapiens, and spun that out, which is what became SkySwitch in January of 2014.
Wow, excellent. Yeah, and so it was really. It sounds like the market, for MSPs was NetSapiens was a key part of sort of developing that in the US, and so then what you're saying is SkySwitch was sort of born out of that, and you broke it off as a separate business. What was it like in those early days of SkySwitch? When what were the challenges, and what were you sort of facing in the market there at that time?
Frankly, the biggest challenge was just keeping up with the demand. I mentioned that, I had kind of been in the same business previously, and it was really much easier at this time, mostly because technology had improved. Just the whole experience of talking on the internet was becoming easier to facilitate from a technology standpoint. That is, there were still a lot of challenges on the business side. But really, I think SkySwitch started at a time when MSPs and interconnects were really looking for a different kind of solution. Probably half of SkySwitch businesses were interconnects. That's a word for companies that would sell the traditional PBXs. So brands like Avaya and Mitel and ESI and Panasonic and those types of solutions where the PBX would live in a closet, in a telecom closet somewhere at the customer's location. So those types of businesses were seeing the writing on the wall with the UCaaS solutions where the solution lived in the cloud. And quite frankly, they saw themselves becoming disintermediated by those companies. Sure, they could act as an agent and maybe collect a spiff when signing those customers up for the services, but to the extent that those customers were now the customers of these big national UCaaS companies and no longer needed their on-premise PBX, well, that type of business was now out of business, and they didn't necessarily have the technical acumen or really understand the cloud well enough to do anything about it. So I think SkySwitch really answered a very unique need at that point in time, because these types of customers could roll out a pretty full-featured UCaaS solution to these customers, still own that customer because they had the billing relationship, and really see a nice path to profitability with very good margins. So I say that because at the time the demand was fantastic. So the big challenges at SkySwitch in the beginning were just, how do we keep up with this demand? It was really about onboarding 10 or 20 new resellers a month. I mean, that's kind of the rate we were going at. And so we really had to work hard to build the back office and the processes and everything that goes into just processing and training and the knowledge transfer that goes into getting new UCaaS providers up to speed. So that was probably primarily the biggest challenge at the time.
Yeah.
Good problem to have, and knock on wood, we did a pretty good job, I think.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Look, in your 7 years at SkySwitch, you partnered with over 600 MSPs around North America. Wow. You would have seen some of them do better than others. So what was it that set apart the ones that were really successful against the others?
I think the two traits that were common in our most successful partners were, number one, providers that found a way to focus on a particular niche. We're able to say, for this type of customer, we're better than all the other solutions because X, Y, and Z. And it doesn't really matter how you define that niche, as long as it's something that you could define. Sometimes it was a type of business. So we had customers who were very strong into, say, car dealerships or medical or multi-location retail. However they defined our market, they would be able to approach those customers and say, we're better for you than the generic UCaaS providers you're going to see quotes from because of these reasons. Of course, that's not to say that that's all they sold to, but having that kind of particular specialty really made a difference. And so that was one of the traits that I saw in the more successful providers that we worked with. Of course, if you were from the interconnect world and you had an existing base of customers who were, say, on one of the old style PBXs, and you developed a way to migrate them, even that kind of specialty, the ability to migrate from the old system to the new, frankly, that's not an easy thing to do, and it's quite painful for the business, who's transitioning away from a system they know and have been using for quite a while to something that's better in a lot of ways, but definitely different than what they're used to. So that's a specialty in and of itself. And so customers who could rely on their service provider to kind of ease that transition would find that very valuable. And therefore, the service providers who were able to make that pitch in a convincing way were also successful. But then that's just another kind of specialty where you're saying this is a niche where I excel at. So that was one thing. I think the other trait is, were companies that thought big. Were just able to kind of prepare themselves for success. And by that, I mean taking the time in advance to develop the internal business processes necessary to be successful. So, as you can imagine, many smaller businesses are so busy just with the day-to-day and in and out of running a business and answering the phones and talking to customers. It's hard to separate yourself from that whole process and devote yourself, and it really takes a dedicated effort to build the things that you need to do to scale in a software business, if you will. So so things like automation, right? Automation can be expensive. Buying the tools that will allow you to automate can be expensive, and a lot of smaller companies don't want to make that investment. But you really arguably need to make that investment to be able to, a lot of times what happens is you're going along, signing up customers, and all of a sudden a great deal comes in, 600 seats. Well, that's a kind of a shocking event for an organization that's never had to onboard a large customer like that. Everything from the porting to managing the phone numbers to just the installation of the phones and testing the network and all those things. So if you haven't developed the processes, and really included them in your mental model of how you approach the business on an everyday basis, you're not going to be prepared for that big customer that walks in the door, right? And of course, that is that's not a good situation. So I think those two traits were really, what stand out to me as the things that our most successful partners did at SkySwitch.
Right, interesting actually. Yeah. The obviously billing is a big part of that as well.
Absolutely. And billing is a huge part of that, because I can't tell you how many partners we've had who would just bill with an Excel spreadsheet, or would create a PDF, and it's great, but as soon as you get any kind of scale, that's never going to work, and so being prepared ahead of time is crucial.
Exactly. So is selling UCaaS a very profitable activity for MSPs? What sort of margins do MSPs make on UCaaS these days?
It can be very profitable, at SkySwitch, which is a very unique situation with being a white label provider and everything. Partners were making anything from 40 to 70%, and that was very typical. The funny thing is, though, as a white label provider, we provided the same platform to all of our partners, so everybody had the potential to sell to sell a similar type of service. But some partners would sell for $10 a seat, and other partners would sell for $50 a seat, and the only difference between the ones who were selling for $10 and the ones who were selling for $50 was their marketing, the way the value that they projected to potential customers that made their solution worth that much more. Wow. But being behind the scenes as the platform, and knowing that that on the one hand this MSP was selling the same exact thing that the more successful one, it really was an illuminating kind of experience for me to see, because it really just goes to show that your ability to project yourself as a professional company and having done the things that in advance necessary to make you successful in a scalable business really did translate into higher profit margins.
Yeah, wow, that's great. And so what would your advice be to MSPs who are considering selling UCaaS to their existing customer base?
Well, I would say, first, it's possible, as if there's any doubt, it doesn't take much to look around and see that there are many MSPs that are doing it very successfully today. And so, don't be afraid to take the step and investigate or try it out. Next, it would be choose the right business model. The white label provider is very intriguing for anybody who's new to the business, because a white label provider will kind of show you the way, but still allow you to own the customer relationship. So there's always the option down the road, since you own the customer and are billing them, for you to transition to your own switch if you wanted to own your own switch. Of course, when you're picking technology, features are incredibly important. You need to have the bells and whistles. A lot of times when you walk in there and talk to a customer, they're going to have a checklist of things. They read an article, 30 things to make sure your UCaaS provider has, right? And so they're going to go down that checklist, and they want you to have those 30 things. So it's important to actually to at least have an answer for those questions when you're talking to the customer. And the platform that you choose, of course, will dictate to a large extent whether you're going to be able to answer those. Just some general things. Multi-tenancy is very important in a platform. There are very many platforms out there, but the list gets considerably smaller when you look for cloud-native platforms. That is, when you're cloudy, it implies that you can scale, right? And so you can be multi-tenant and have the flexibility to just add resources as you gain customers. So those three things on the technology side, I think, are very important. Then the other thing is to choose partners wisely. In the UCaaS world, especially, the value of your solution is multiplied by the number of different systems that it can talk to. And today the list is very long in terms of CRM systems and ERP systems and all the different types of ways that customers interact with you. You want to be able to have a platform that can embrace all those different types of information exchanges, if you will, and so an open system that's programmable and has the right APIs, if not, pre-existing integrations already built out. Those things are all very important. Also, along the lines of partners is the ability to handle the non-technical parts of the business. There's a lot of business type regulation, if you will, that's involved in providing phone service. Billing and taxation, of course, is the top of the list. The tax rules are different in pretty much every jurisdiction throughout the United States. So you have to be able to handle that. If you're only going to sell in your locality and that's all you ever want to do, you might be able to learn all the rules and do it the hard way with brute force. But if the second you go into another jurisdiction, they're going to be different rules, right? So you have to be able to adapt to that, and then multiply that by the whole United States, and it becomes daunting pretty quickly. So having a partner like Datagate that can walk you through that and a compliance advisor is very important. There's other kinds of regulations too. If you're selling into the medical field, HIPAA is a big thing. So being able to sign that BSA and feel confident that you're HIPAA compliant, and there are partners and companies that can help do that. So being tied up with an ecosystem that provides you with those kinds of relationships is very important. There's a couple others. E911. It's a law that when you provide phone service, the subscriber has to be able to pick up that phone and dial 911 so that emergency services can find them and get to their door. So that's kind of table stakes these days, but it's still very important. And believe it or not all solutions out there, are E911 friendly. And then, a more recent thing is spam prevention. All the deluge of marketing calls that are coming in, is really out of hand, and the FCC has mandated that telecom providers, put a stop to that. So there's not to get too technical, but there's a protocol called Stir Shaken and it's mandated that all phone service providers, are able to to adhere to the stir-shaken protocol. So being able to handle these things, and it's ever changing. So being able to handle these kinds of regulations and in the market is important, and of course having the partnerships and ecosystems that will allow you to do that is important as a result.
Absolutely. And so Eric, what would you say to MSPs who don't sell UCaaS and choose not to sell UCaaS to their customers? What would you say to them?
I come across a lot of MSPs that are very successful and don't sell UCaaS. And when I ask them why, they typically say, well, we're successful because we focus on what we know and we do a great job at it. So who am I to argue with that, right? That's success is its own story there. But I would say that there's an opportunity that perhaps is being missed by not selling UCaaS. The demand is huge, especially over the past year with people needing to work from home and having the flexibility that UCaaS provides. MSPs are in a prime position to be able to meet that need. The ability to manage those, in essence, a VoIP phone is just a little purpose-built computer, and the ability to manage that computer is right up the alley for an MSP. Granted, there are other external factors that make it a little bit different, but those things are manageable. So I would say it's certainly worth the effort to explore the UCaaS business if you haven't, and if you have, then it's a great idea to partner with somebody who does provide that, and to be able to benefit from that relationship in a way that's not purely commission based, right? You want to be able to have some way to control that business relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Eric, now that you've sold SkySwitch to BCM1, what advantages can you see that BCM1 will bring to SkySwitch and its base of MSP resellers?
I think the main thing is just scale. BCM1 is a much larger organization with deep pockets and a lot of resources. So some of the challenges that we had at SkySwitch were related to us being a small company and being able to grow with the market. Quite frankly, wasn't always easy. So I think now that SkySwitch is part of BCM1, that will no longer be a challenge. From the customer perspective, I think access to a bigger range of products is probably one of the main benefits they'll experience. BCM1 is very much into the selling the last mile circuits, so TDM circuits, data circuits. So SkySwitch resellers can now resell those things like SD-WAN and say Microsoft licenses. These are all products that BCM1 has a lot of experience selling, and as a result, those products are now available to SkySwitch resellers also. So I think it's a good thing.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. So coming back to now, in addition to joining Datagate's board of directors, you're now the CEO of an exciting new technology business called RabbitRun. Please, could you tell us about RabbitRun and what it has to offer our MSP audience?
Of course, I'd love to. So by now, pretty much everybody has heard about SD-WAN and the problems that it solves for enterprises. Kind of the opportunity that RabbitRun is presenting is these SD-WAN solutions, almost without exception, have been designed for large enterprises. The use cases that they were built for, assumes that you're going to have a big company with different locations. You want to tie those locations together, and that's what SD-WAN kind of is, almost by definition. The founder of RabbitRun, Pat Zavidra, had a different take. About 3 years ago, he thought that the market was missing an SD-WAN solution for people working at home, and really started to build that with that vision in mind. And this is way before the pandemic, of course. But now with the pandemic where we is, and almost every company having some portion of its workers working from home, it becomes even more important, that you're able to take some of the core functions of SD-WAN and deploy them to the home market. And so RabbitRun is a company that lets you do that. By virtue of the fact that other solutions have been built more for the enterprise space, they're sometimes needlessly complex, and that complexity makes them expensive. RabbitRun really took just the most required features for the work at home market and put them into a package that was considerably less complex. Just as one example, in a typical SD-WAN deployment, you're going to have a router at the customer premise, and you're going to have some sort of concentrator in the cloud. And the fact that you have these two components on either side of the data circuit means that you can do things with those data circuits, like managing quality of service, bonding multiple internet connections together, making remote offices appear as if they're on the same network.
Wow.
So what RabbitRun was able to do, though, was to make all of those types of features available without the cloud concentrator. So with just a small appliance at a user's home or at a small office, you get all the same benefits. But because it's less complex, it's really much more cost effective, and it's the kind of solution that can be sold to an enterprise or a small business that has people working at home. So it's really an exciting opportunity, because there's really no other solution that addresses this space in quite the same way, and it's an opportunity for any MSP that has customers with work from home workers to realize another revenue stream, by providing a solution for those work at home workers.
Yeah. I mean, it really seems like the right product at the right time. The way the world's going now with all the work from home, there must be a lot of demand for this type of product. And wow, looks good.
Yeah, the interest has really been almost overwhelming. I joined the company in March, so just about 2 months ago, and it's been fantastic. I mean, there's certainly a demand for it out there, and so right now we're a small company, but we're working hard to gear up and put all of the things I was talking about, the processes and back office and documentation and everything in place, so that we can meet that demand and really scale with it.
Absolutely.
So exciting times.
Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you. So looking forward, how do you see the MSP industry evolving over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think what we've seen in the past year with the pandemic is just a prelude to what's going to continue happening. As I said before, the traditional telecom environment is going away. TDM is going away. Companies want to consume services from the cloud. They don't want to buy solutions that are installed on premise and will be obsolete the day after they're installed. And the big telcos are not going to be able to meet that need. They're just not cut out to sell those types of solutions. So it's really the market that for MSPs to take advantage of. So I see it continue. What you're going to see is that the larger telcos are going to continue losing market share in the business telecommunications space, and the MSPs are going to be the beneficiaries of that. And so all the things that means, for the MSP business, obviously there's going to be a lot of activity in terms of mergers and acquisitions and consolidation, and the whole business cycle as these kinds of trends work through. So it's going to be a very interesting and exciting time, I think, over the next 5 to 10 years as these things play out.
Absolutely. Well, Eric, thank you very much for being our guest today. We do have some questions from our audience, and now we'll jump into our live Q&A session. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so first question is, I own and manage a cluster server from a multi-tenant cloud hosted VoIP from Bicom. I don't know if you're familiar with BICOM, but if you are, what UCaaS solution would you recommend integrating with my switch? And second question is, if Datagate will interface with BICOM and Sensei, my SBC units. Thank you.
Well, I can take the first part of that question. I am somewhat familiar with BICOM. It's been a couple of years since I really looked at it closely. I believe it's an Asterisk-based kind of white label platform. Today, I'd say the biggest opportunity, or for differentiating yourself, is taking advantage of Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is pretty much everywhere today, and there are solutions out there, two in particular, that I'm familiar with, that will let you take Teams and register that Teams client to your PBX in a way that's kind of seamless. So the Teams essentially becomes a soft phone that's registered to the PBX. So you can really leapfrog, and avoid a lot of integrations, because for the most part, Teams has everything you would need from a collaboration standpoint. But of course, Teams does not necessarily play well with you as an independent UCaaS provider. But these third-party solutions, one is from a company called Teammate Technology, another is from a company called Qnify. You can find them easily, I'm sure, on the interwebs. Will let you basically turn whatever you have in your BICOM solution and expand that with all the capabilities of Microsoft Teams. So that's probably like the easiest way to differentiate your service today. That's really all that's coming to mind, though.
Pretty good. Thank you.
I'm sure you can handle the second part of that question.
Yep. The second question is, yes, Datagate can certainly integrate with BICOM and for telecom billing. So typically, if we can get any kind of CDR feed from it, which we can from all the platforms we've worked with, we can certainly automate the billing for that. So yes, thank you for that question. Thank you. Another question, Eric, with RabbitRun, what value does it offer in terms of VoIP UCaaS implementations?
You know what? I'm sorry, Mark. My phone was ringing. I just silenced it. Would you mind repeating that?
No problem at all. Yeah. So what in particular value would RabbitRun offer to a VoIP or UCaaS implementation? Sure. Well, so first off is, if you're selling UCaaS, you need a way to manage the quality of service that your end users are experiencing. Things like packet loss and jitter are just a fact of life, and you need a way to handle those situations. So SD-WAN is typically the answer to that. You can do things like quality of service and traffic shaping and load balancing. What RabbitRun brings to the table is the ability to extend those capabilities to home workers, because RabbitRun's deployment model is such that it's economically feasible for companies to pay for the home workers to have this type of solution, and that to me is groundbreaking, because it just doesn't exist outside of RabbitRun today. So it's a whole new revenue stream. Even if you were providing quality of service to offices, small and medium-sized businesses, whomever, being able to extend that now to their workers at home is a whole another revenue stream that's right for the picking. Excellent, thank you. Another question. Do you have any advice for an interconnect owner? We have saturated our existing customer base, but we still want to grow.
Yes, growth it's always a challenge, especially if you've sold to your existing base already. A couple things is to look into other services like SD-WAN, right? If you're not already selling SD-WAN to the base, you can sell new services related to UCaaS that will meet the challenges that your existing customers have. Not just SD-WAN, but CRM integrations, SMS, other things that will just allow you to increase what you sell to the customers you already have. beyond your existing customer base, that's always the challenge. And I go back to what I said before, which is to find a way of defining your market that you can meet in a way that nobody else can, right? So just whatever that is. Again, maybe it's picking a particular type of customer, dentists, doctors' offices, chiropractors, whatever it is. Each of those segments, if you will, have unique requirements. Real estate offices, for example, SMS is great for real estate offices. Whatever it happens to be, find a way to meet their needs and market to them in a way that nobody else is doing. And if you pick if you pick your segment wisely and then think about exactly how you're going to approach that, it's not difficult to make it such that if they have 10 quotes from 9 other guys, you're the only one who says, this is what I'm going to do for you in this way. And again, I go back to the UCaaS providers that I see who are starting from a very small base, installed base. The ones who have grown the fastest are the ones who have been able to do that.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Eric. I really appreciate your time with us today. And we've had some great questions coming through and a really good audience attendance. So really appreciated. So to everyone here, if you have any further questions for Eric, please don't hesitate to send those to us. The email addresses are here on the screen. So we'd be very happy to follow up with any further questions. So we have recorded today's session, and we will be sending that out to you. And so if you miss any part of it, you'll be able to see that in the recording. So again, thank you very much for joining us, everybody. It's been great talking with you and talking with Eric today. Look to see you all soon in our future webinar sessions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Great job. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.